Hello, my name is Marybeth Gilliam, and this is the Outperform Cancer podcast, where we bring you anti-cancer strategies supported by peer-reviewed research. We've all heard that early detection saves lives. But if that's true, why are we still seeing so many women diagnosed with late-stage breast cancer? The data is hard to ignore. Women who skip their annual screening aren't just diagnosed later. They're about 55% more likely to have larger tumors, nearly 30% more likely to have lymph node involvement, and more than 4 times as likely to already have metastatic cancer at the point of diagnosis. The fact is, despite decades of awareness campaigns, far too many women don't get diagnosed until they have advanced disease. Across research studies, we see about a quarter to a third of new breast cancers diagnosed as stage 2B or higher. And that's in areas of high resource. The numbers are even worse in middle and low income settings. Perhaps part of the problem is that we've treated screening like a routine instead of what it really is, a strategy. We are now in the age of precision medicine, where risk can be quantified, imaging can be layered, and care can be personalized. But in breast cancer screening, we're often still operating with outdated models. One example is genetic testing. The vast majority of patients who receive genetic testing do so after they've already been diagnosed with cancer. My research found that only about 8 or 9% of women who are diagnosed with breast cancer had genetic testing prior to their diagnosis. It always strikes me as odd that we tend to test after a cancer diagnosis when the information could have been far more powerful before the diagnosis, when a patient could have received more intensive screening. So how do we fix this? Today, I'm joined by Dr. Ryan Polselli, a fellowship-trained breast imaging radiologist, former medical director of breast imaging at Memorial Health University Hospital, and founder and CEO of MammoLink. Ryan began his career in the U.S. Navy, serving in the nuclear power program for submarines and surface ships, an experience that shaped how he thinks about systems, efficiency, and access to care. After years working inside the healthcare system, Ryan saw a pattern that he couldn't ignore. Too many women were being diagnosed with later stage disease. Not because the technology didn't exist, but because the system wasn't working for the patients. That realization led him to start MammoLink, a mobile breast imaging company designed to remove barriers, improve compliance, and ultimately catch cancer earlier. In this conversation, we're going to break down where screening is falling short, what most women don't know about their own risk, and how a more personalized, precision-based approach could change outcomes, starting today. Join me in welcoming Dr. Ryan Polselli. Ryan, welcome to the Outperform Cancer podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Marybeth. Pleasure to be here.
I'd like to start out just talking about, mammograms themselves. We've been told for decades that mammograms save lives.
Mm-hmm.
So why are we still seeing late-stage diagnoses? From your perspective, what's broken about how we approach screening today? Why don't we catch everyone at a stage 0 or a stage 1?
Yep. Good question. And ideally we should. And I think if we were doing it more efficiently and more effectively, we would find them at much lower stages. What I see, and I think the studies support this, so both anecdotally and also in the studies, is that the longer you go between a screening, the more advanced the cancer is when it's detected. And even though we do see, you hear the reports, compliance is up to 80%, the way they're measuring it is misleading. So it's not truly 80% that are getting it every year, their screening mammogram. They do that on a 2-year basis. And so we're seeing that a lot of The statistics are showing that people are actually getting screened maybe at the 2-year limit. And then two, also a lot of the later stage cancers are from people that are just not compliant as well. So overall, I think that if we have a lot of room to go and to improve. And I think the bottom line is that the statistics are a little bit misleading.
It is odd that they measure it over 2 years because
Yeah.
all of the statistics I find for how beneficial mammogram is are all measured in 1 year.
Right.
So you're saying our statistics that say, hey, look, everybody's getting their mammogram, we got an over 80% compliance rate, is actually every 2 years. Now that doesn't make any sense to me.
No, it doesn't. Not at all. It's an outdated system. I think they need to update it. If we saw what the statistics were, I've seen varying reports, but I mean, it drops significantly if you go to annual screenings. 60%. I've seen lower even. So I think that's part of the problem.
Okay, let's clarify for a minute. When you say
Mhm.
drops to 60%,
Yeah.
you mean compliance?
Compliant.
So, the number of people who are getting their annual mammogram.
Yes.
So just tell me that one more time so I'm clear. I don't want
Yeah. So basically, I mean, I say 60, but I've seen lower studies. And it's you're essentially saying that half of women don't get an annual mammogram, even though, the reported statistic is that there's 85% compliance,
right.
which is huge. And that's about what I see
Mhm.
in daily practice.
Really amazing. I want to make sure that listeners out there understand too, it varies differently by state. So there are some states with very low compliance. Wyoming, I think, was last, Idaho. There are some states like that have far lower compliance from
True.
all these rates that we were just talking about. And then, of course, some states with higher compliance. I know Massachusetts was a state with very high compliance. The Northeast tends to be a little more compliant. So it may vary in a particular person's area.
Sure. Yeah. And I think some of that is access, but even with great access, you don't see necessarily good utilization of it. It's just become so inconvenient.
Right.
And, out of sight, out of mind. I feel well. It's just another thing in my daily life. I'm busy. I'm a mom. I have kids to take care of that depend on me. When am I going to make time for this 10-step process to get it done? And I think people want to point the finger at the patients and they call it, oh, they're non-compliant.
Right.
But I think that's an excuse. I think that's a way to cover up that the system isn't making it more easy or easier for the patient, in my opinion.
That is a great segue over to what you're doing and your story.
Mhm.
You didn't just wake up one day and start a screening company.
Right.
Can you tell
Right.
me, what did you see in, I think, the hospital system, right?
Yeah.
In the hospital
Yeah.
setting that made you think, hey, this isn't working and got you to do something about it? Because
Yeah.
you have a really interesting story.
Well, exactly what you were just talking about is, I'd see this late stage cancer and I'd look back, I'm like, oh, she hasn't been screened in 3 years. Dang, if she would have just come 2 years ago, right? And then when you present the news, it's going to hit really hard because the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to blame themselves. Why didn't I get the screening? And I saw that over and over and over. And I just happened to pick up a contract and I started reading for a mobile company. And I started to notice, I was like, these patients are coming back every year. In other words, in this company, when they would go to the employer's location and they would come back every year, 365 days, 360, every single patient. And so I'd see 3-4 years of compliance where it was every year they were getting it. And then, of course, we were finding earlier, lower stage cancers. And so that got me thinking, like, there's got to be a better way. And what's the real issue here? And I realized it's convenience, it's friction, it's all those things that are so hard to do.
Most of our listeners will not be familiar with MammoLink,
Sure.
your company. Tell
Yeah.
us what it is and
Yeah.
what you're doing.
Sure. Well, I mean, essentially, we're just trying to break down all the barriers. The mobile aspect, I think, is what everybody latches onto. They see mobile mammography, and that's kind of the optical part of the whole thing. But that's really an extension of the philosophy, which is screening is not. It shouldn't be in a hospital system. It shouldn't be inaccessible. It shouldn't be subject to the same rules that that you face when you go into, I mean, it's a very rigid, difficult system in many cases. Screening should be easy. It should be kind of like you walk out the door and it's there and you get it done in 10 minutes. Just get rid of all that. And then if you do that, people will get screened. And then obviously, you'll have much, much better outcomes. And to me, it's the elephant in the room. But I just don't know why it's not being addressed more. And so, that's what we're doing as a company is we're just trying to eliminate all the barriers, every single thing that you can think of that's a pain point. From, I didn't get a script. They won't let me on, right? We said, okay, no script because you don't have to have one by law. So we eliminated that. The callbacks, they're as few and as possible, right? So real high quality interpretation, trying to eliminate any steps between studies that don't do it all in one time, in one setting, and then give the results. That's another thing. I think that if you just have a positive experience from the screening, you're going to come back.
Yeah.
And so, and if you give a horrible one, you're just not going to. I mean, It's as simple as that. And nobody really looks at that.
Well, I want to just go back to something you were just talking about because it is an important differentiator. I know when I would get my mammography early on, if there was something that didn't look quite right, then I would have to come back for a second appointment with an ultrasound. How are you doing this differently?
So we're trying to do everything in the same day, and by most accounts we do. So if we see dense breast tissue, then we automatically do the ultrasound right there in the next room. So we don't make you come back for it. So there's a lot of incentives out there for things to be taking place in 2 days. So for example, if you do a diagnostic mammogram on the same day that you come in for your screening, you only get paid once. If you do it over 2 days, you get paid twice. So there's this massive, and I mean, there's an incentive right there to stretch it out and to make it more difficult and stuff. So we've said we don't care. We're going to do what's easiest and right. We'd rather build, a trust and a following so patients come every year. And I think that's a win-win for everybody. And so that's how we're doing it. We are identifying the dense breast tissue with an AI program, which makes it possible so that which wasn't the intended purpose of the program. The program was to detect more cancers, which we're still using. But the side effect or the benefit of it is, okay, well, if we're identifying the dense tissue, then we can then shuttle them to the next room to get their ultrasound and have it done.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you're using AI two ways then. You're using it to identify dense breast tissue, and you're using it for reading the radiology to make sure that you're getting as much help as possible to see even fine and very, very small activity of cancer?
Correct.
Oh, that's exciting.
It is. And we're seeing much better compliance. Patients are coming back and they're having a good experience with it. And I really think that's just the right approach to have with screening. I think we get so much tunnel vision. And we've been trained and we've been through so much schooling and stuff as, physicians and in the hospital system. And, we think medical legally and just rigid that we forget at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters is if the patient comes back next year.
Yeah.
Did we get the optimal compression? Maybe not. But you know what? Did you give a great experience? Because if you did, you may have saved a life, right? The compression, is it really going to make a big difference? And so I think we kind of lose sight of what the big picture is.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think that we're touching on something super important too when we talk about dense breast and these different experiences that women have, because women are all different. And I really believe that we are in the age of precision medicine. The AI tools that we have are taking us there. Biomarker testing is taking us there. And I think that there is more patient ownership and engagement in their care, which is, we know statistically, the research has been done on this, that an engaged patient has better outcomes. So can you talk about how you approach screening on a personalized basis, meaning how do you differentiate when someone has dense breast? And how do you have any risk assessment tools, for example, to help patients understand where they are on a risk continuum?
Yeah, and that's an ongoing process. Education is huge, and ownership is huge. Yeah, I refer to it as internal locus of control. When patients feel that they have the control, anxiety is decreased. They're, like you said, much more engaged. All of that, and so the whole process for us is to make patients feel in control and to have that experience instead of go over there, do this. You stripped away all control, and then all of a sudden, the engagement decreases. And part of that also is education. So here's why, and we do that a lot too. So when we do detect dense breast tissue, we'll give them an education card. Here's what it means. Here's what it is. Because now what's happening is there's so much disinformation about some of the modalities and stuff that's happening. I think that's one of the unfortunate side effects of all of this, is we need to up the education piece of it. And so that's what we're trying really hard to do. Here's what it means. Here's the significance. Here's how, if we add ultrasound to your mammogram, it'll detect an extra couple of cancers per every 1,000 that we screen, that type of thing. And say, oh, wow, that's great. But don't be misled just because, we're saying that this is, going to help the mammogram doesn't mean the mammogram's not good. And that's the other thing that we're seeing a lot of. So, we try to educate in the proper way so that next time everybody understands. And again, that helps with the control,
Yeah.
and the whole process.
Can you specifically, because there are a lot of women out there, a lot of young women who,
Yeah.
in particular, who have dense breasts.
Yes.
So would you just take us through, specifically, if you find someone with dense breasts,
Yeah.
what do you tell them? What's different for them?
Good question. So, mammography is a tool where, the radiation passes through and we get reflections and we can kind of see the pattern and we can see densities. But when the whole breast becomes extremely dense, so cancer is very dense by itself. The cells are very tightly compacted. They're replicating and duplicating. And so you have this very dense ball. But when the tissue around it is dense, it's very hard to see the differences. If the tissue around is very fatty and not very dense, it pops, right? You can see it, the conspicuity of it. And so, the dense breast tissue makes it harder to see. So things are detected. So cancers that would normally be seen at maybe the 3 millimeter, 4 millimeter stage, you might need to wait until it's, a centimeter before you're going to pick it up with the density. And so that's one of the limitations of mammography. Does it mean it's not good? No, absolutely not. I mean, you're still able to get a whole view of the breast and things that you don't see on ultrasound. And it's still the best tool that we have, but we want to fill in that limitation with ultrasound, which has that penetrating ability. And there's some downsides to ultrasound too. And so we'll educate about that, right? So just because we see something on ultrasound, most of the things we see on ultrasound are benign, but now there's a little more worry. Oh, you found this solid thing. Don't worry, it looks benign. We'll watch it, that kind of thing. So it's a whole process. It really is.
Mm-hmm. The longer that I am in this healthcare business, I will say, of
Yeah.
showing up to the hospital every day and reading a lot of reports. One of the things that I've learned is, medicine is an art. It is
Yeah.
not black and white. Everyone would
No.
love a black and white answer,
Yep.
but I'm here to tell you folks, you're not going to get one. Healthcare and medicine in general, it is a lot of gray area.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's so important to be engaged and to understand what's happening so that you can use your own filter and your own experience to say that sounds right to me or that doesn't sound right to me. I will just give you a little backstory for me, Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
When I was first diagnosed in 2007, it was because I insisted on a second mammography. I had a mammogram 6 months prior, and it was clear. And then in that 6-month time, the whole texture of my breast changed. I found 2 lumps. My OBGYN was feeling around. She's like, "Oh, I think it's okay,
Yeah.
but you can go for another mammogram if you want."
Yeah.
And I was like, I have to. So I
Right.
went. They didn't see anything on the mammogram.
Mhm.
I kept insisting. So they did an ultrasound. When they did the ultrasound, they said, "We see something, but it doesn't look like cancer." And I
Mm.
was like, persistent
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
And so they decided they would do a core needle biopsy.
Mhm.
The core needle biopsy doctor told me, "I've been doing this 25 years and I'm sure this isn't cancer." And I said, "Great, I can't wait to hear that." But all 5 core needle biopsies came back
Wow.
with the highest aggression of cancer.
Wow.
Um, and one of the things I want people to know, A, be
Yeah.
persistent if you think something's wrong.
Yes.
Don't
Yes.
just say, "Well, I said maybe there's something there and they
Yeah.
told me no and I feel better now. I'm just going to go away." So
Yes.
A, listen to what your gut is telling you. Listen
Mhm.
to what you know about your body. And B, things can change fast.
Yes.
And when you have an aggressive cancer,
Mhm.
don't tell yourself, "Well, I've got another mammogram coming up in 6 months."
Yeah.
Because when you have an aggressive cancer, even an average cancer will grow 1.6 times in about 70 days.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, folks, this is real. This is why annual screening is so important.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, and I think there's something to be said about trusting your gut. I cannot tell you the number of times when patients have come in and they're like, it's bothering me. Something doesn't feel right." And I've done the same thing. You look, right? This does not look bad. But I've always said, you know what? Always defer to the patient. And because I learned very early on with a couple of these that there's something that patients have like a sixth sense with their own body. It's remarkable, really. And, a lot of those that you think, by all means, this should have come back benign, do not. So I think I would definitely encourage patients to do that. Not only that, there's something to be said for peace of mind.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, so I've had patients where, it doesn't meet criteria for biopsy, but this is just something that's going to worry them every night for 6 months. I'm like, what's the harm? It's a needle. It's one
Right.
one little test. And
Right.
especially if you're good, they don't even feel it. Right.
Right.
And then of course, all of a sudden you go back to normal. And I think that also breeds trust and recurrence and compliance and the whole 9 yards, because now you have control.
Yes.
So
Control is such a big part of it.
yeah. Yeah.
I think you're doing some work too on just helping women understand their risk.
Mhm. Yes.
And you mentioned to me that you're putting together some contextual data and helping people understand their risk too.
Yeah.
Would you talk a little bit about the biggest risk factors that women underestimate?
So the big one for me is that I think a lot of people get stuck in the mindset that I don't have any hereditary risk because there's nobody in my family that has breast cancer. And the fact is, most of the cancers that we diagnose are people with no family history. I always say, just because you don't have any risk factors, it's not enough for you. You still need to have screened. Now, if you do have risk factors, you really better get screened.
Right.
And I think the one that's important to know for patients out there is high risk. It's kind of an arbitrary number because what's the difference if your risk comes back to 19 or 21%, right? I mean, you're still high risk, but the cutoff that we've set is if you have greater than 20% lifetime risk. And at that point, the guidelines say you may need to supplement your mammography with breast MRI or another modality kind of thing. Those scores can be really easily obtained in multiple different ways. There's free ones online. The Tyrer-Cuzick is a good one that people like to use a lot, and they call it the TC score, just because it's quick and easy and it's been validated. But there's all kinds out there. I think it's really good to know your risk, because if you are high risk, you definitely need to make sure you don't ever skip a screening. Yeah.
So you're saying every patient should know their risk.
Hmm.
And you can calculate it. This isn't one of those squidgy things,
Right.
really.
Right.
Your actual number might be a little
Yeah.
gray in terms of whether a 19 or a 21,
Yeah.
but you can quantify, and this is important for
Yeah.
what you would qualify for screening. But you can quantify, are you a high risk breast cancer?
Right.
At a high risk for breast cancer, and you can
Yes.
do that with online tools.
Yeah, Tyrer-Cuzick, it's a weird spelling, Tyrercuzick. And that's it's a very popular one in the breast imaging world because it's been validated, it's simple, it's easy, and it looks at a lot of the hereditary, which we know is a very significant influential factor in determining risk. So I like that one personally. But there's others now. There's genetic testing, which is so available. And what's really interesting one, Marybeth, it's coming out now, is they're actually looking at, and as radiologists, we kind of have known this for a long time, is you look at a certain breast and you're like, that's a setup for cancer. I can't tell you what it is. I could just look at the tissue and those are the ones you slow down. You're like, there could be something here. It just looks like a breast that would have cancer. So there's something in the breast tissue in identifying it that tells us there's a risk. And AI is now proving this. So there's tools being developed where they're looking at the textures of breast to determine what the risk is just from the appearance, which is crazy to me. And so, as we move forward, I think there's going to be better and better, but that stuff needs to be adopted quickly. One of the downsides, of course, is that medicine is slow.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yes, it
Horribly
is.
slow.
It is unfortunately quite slow. It takes on average 15 years to go from a medical discovery to clinical practice. And that's a number used by the NIH, NCI.
That's crazy. I mean, I've never heard that actual statistic, so that's new to me, but not surprising at all. I mean, look at the whole supply chain. The whole thing is slow. From even if you consider like physician training, it's a 10-year supply chain right there, just to get into the system, and then FDA approval, pharmaceutical approval, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's a lot of momentum and hard to change.
I know that you were in the military formerly.
Yeah.
Can you tell me how that experience shaped how you think about systems and logistics and access to care? Like, did that inform your business?
That's a really good question too. So there's a lot of negative things that come from the military, right? We have this idea in our head, but they're extremely good at a lot of things, and especially with systems and training. And I think that did help shape the way I think about things, just from a more global perspective, and seeing how the parts fit together to make a whole that operates in unity. And so that probably shaped my mindset. But you know what? I think just being human, right? So the more experiences you have, whether it's the military or, like I was attending bar to get through college, and just dealing with people and stuff like that, I feel like that's helped me more than my medical training. Because you understand people, you understand psychology, and, now you can get through, or, that kind of thing. So definitely has had a formative effect.
Wow. Yeah. You mentioned, tending bar, and which, that's usually a lot of young people. And sometimes it's harder to get those young people in. Sometimes it's harder to get people in rural areas to come in. They might have to drive further.
Yeah.
And you're getting around that by having a mobile mammography unit. Is there anything in your communications to these women that you find is helpful in getting them to show up? Is there something that we need to say here on this podcast as we reach out to those younger women, or maybe people that it takes them longer to get there, or there's more hardship in even coming up with a copay? Even though I do know, I think now in the United States, 93 or 94% of women are covered for mammography with no cost.
Yeah. So all those scary barriers, right? Collections. Are they going to, have to, collect a payment when I go? Am I going to feel stupid? Am I going to feel awkward? What is the experience like? One of the things that I have noticed, and, I don't think there's any research around this, but it's definitely true, is that screening mammography is kind of a community event for some people. So if, we go to a workplace and we say, you go on a baseline at 35, we'll allow that kind of thing, because we are seeing the younger and younger patients getting breast cancer now. The coworkers are there. They're like, come on, so there's a buddy system and some support. I think that's been very helpful, and one of the things that we kind of encourage, because, it's kind of like take you under the wing and, oh, you had your first mammogram and get a picture or whatever kind of thing. I did
Yeah.
it because it has, some, everybody's like, oh, painful and that kind of thing. And so getting them through that. So we do everything that we can to try to
Mhm.
minimize those barriers, to make it comfortable. We're trying to actually make it fun.
Good.
The experience fun, and light, joking and happy and stuff. And I think that really contributes overall to a positive and then continual compliance experience.
Yeah, just as you said, like having a mammogram buddy, the idea that you're not in it alone is a theme that I hear again and again with cancer patients, right? It can be scary. It can be very intimidating if you've lost someone in your own family or a friend, and now you're going through the experience of screening. Um, it can feel very lonely. So doing it with someone can really help alleviate that. I think that's a great insight, Ryan. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's they become evangelists. Hey, come on.
Can you tell me, how do you know when standard screening isn't enough for them? Like, does that change over time? I mean, breast texture must change over time. Do you have those records and carry with those women to see when they might need to make a change?
From my perspective, the most important thing, I try to keep it simple, is just keep coming back. And then also education. So you said something that was very, very important, is just because you had a negative mammogram doesn't mean I don't have to worry about anything, because there's those interval cancers that come up in 6 months and all of a sudden you feel a lump, come back. And I think if you have created the environment where people already trust you and they trust the whole process and they feel comfortable, it's the person that doesn't ask the question that gets screwed,
Yeah.
and that is afraid or just assumed the wrong thing, or it's so hard. You can't get them on the phone, and then you do. And so we work really, really, really hard to make sure that everybody knows that, you're going to get help no matter what.
I know we've talked a little bit about quality in the screening and different tools that we have.
Mhm.
But I think that you have some interesting information about, quality in screening that we haven't touched on yet, in terms of radiologist specialization and things like. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something in everybody's mind is, how do I know I'm getting quality? I mean, everybody knows, okay, so it's an accredited facility, but they don't necessarily look at the things that are quality measures. And I think that's really important now and in today's society, especially when things are changing so much, because patients are being inundated with things that they, see is this, and honestly, they can be misled. There's financial incentives sometimes to offer things to patients that maybe aren't in the best interest of the patient. And I think it's important to be able to identify quality. One of the things that I really would like to see more of is more published statistics. These are hidden from patients a lot. So every year, the facility has to go through the medical audit, which looks at how many cancers did you detect per 1,000 patients, and it's a number. Our cancer detection rate is like twice the national average, and that's a lot due to demographics. I would also like to think great systems and things like that too, but it's because we're reaching a different segment of the population that might not otherwise go to the hospital system. So I'm very proud of that. But every facility has a cancer detection rate, and there are some facilities that are just better at it than others. And I think that's useful information to know for patients. Same thing with recall rate, which is something I don't think we think enough about in this screening space, is the callbacks, because we know that if you call back patients again and again and again, and I'll get to the reason behind this. It's like crying wolf, right? Patients come, they're like, oh, they saw something, they get it worked up, oh, it was nothing. Next year, oh, they saw something, get it worked up, it was nothing. By the third year, they don't come back. They're like, it's just always nothing. And so I think you have a very limited number of callbacks that you can use on a patient before they toss in the towel, and you lose them. And so when radiologists and the system abuses the callback system, then you actually do a disservice long term. And so, and there's a huge rate. So, if you called everybody back, you can find more cancers because you're just doing additional testing and more invasive everything, right? But at some point, are you doing any extra good because are you going to find it at a small stage anyways, right? And if you don't call anybody back, well, of course, you're going to be missing. So you have to find that sweet spot where you're just calling back enough of the right patients where your cancer detection rate is still super high, but you're not causing unnecessary worry or concern. And so like our recall rate is about 5%. I'm very proud of that. There are others just like me, same thing, high cancer detection rate, low recall rate. So you're not wasting patients' time, causing anxiety, doing unnecessary biopsies. But there are a lot of facilities now, and it's a trend that I'm seeing, unfortunately. And I think it comes from medical legal concern, right? I'm just going to call everything back so I can never get sued. And now all of a sudden, 25% of patients are coming back. At some point, you can harm the system.
So you had mentioned earlier that if someone needs an ultrasound after a mammogram, if you see something funky looking and you need an
Yeah,
ultrasound, that you'll do it same day. How
right.
much does that have to do with your numbers versus, another person's numbers? Is that a big part of why you don't need to call back?
Absolutely, 100%. Very good. Yep, absolutely. Very insightful. So, yeah, I mean, things that, it looks like a cyst, but you can't be for sure, right? So they're going to need the ultrasound. Well, they got the ultrasound right there. We know it's a cyst, done. And so that eliminates a lot, which is another reason why that this should be done same
Mhm.
time as the mammogram.
And I would imagine that also the AI tool should
Mhm.
also be helping to drive down the
Yeah.
callback rate.
Yeah, for me it is. It definitely is. There's some things that it just gives you a second opinion, and you can
Mhm.
look at it and you're like, yeah, I agree with that. And it helps to decrease it. But the real big benefit for me in the AI portion of this is it's not as good as people think. I mean, you're hearing all this stuff that AI can just do it and it's better than a radiologist. We are so far from that. Like I encourage the day that happens. I think it's going to be great the day that AI can read a mammogram better than me.
Yeah.
I gladly hang my hat up and give it applause for that. But we're not even close to that yet. However, it does offer a lot of advantages, and I like to see groups using it. It's a cost, which is unfortunate because we have to bear the brunt of that cost to bring it. But I think the value that it adds is tremendous in doing so. In terms of, especially nowadays, we're so busy, so many distractions, and this just makes sure that hey, there's, hundreds of slices. Did you miss one? It's a second look, which is great.
So let's wrap this up around quality
Sure.
because we had started this conversation about quality, which led us to, the idea of number of callbacks that someone has to have.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, if I'm a patient,
Mhm.
how on earth do I evaluate quality? Like, how can I tell? Is it the new machine? Is it the
Right.
latest machine? Is it the late,
Yeah.
fellowship trained radiologist? Is
Right.
it
Right.
AI? How, like, are there specific things we should be looking for, and how do
Yeah.
we evaluate it?
I think you're correct. And if I were a patient, some of the things I would look for who's reading the mammograms. Is it somebody that has specialty training in breast? If I have a rotator cuff tear, I don't want somebody in breast reading my rotator cuff tear. I want a musculoskeletal trained radiologist who's seen 10,000 of them and can say it's not that bad or it is bad. And the same thing applies with breast. Um, there's some kind of hidden crossover that's been happening with the shortage of breast radiology and some radiology groups where, breast cases now are piling up and there's a backlog. So they're being handed off to people that don't read them. You really don't want that. And so you can just ask, who's the radiologist? Are they fellowship trained in breast imaging? And I think that's one of the quality ways, or at least an expert in breast, and that's their primary specialty, which is number one. You can also go ask about equipment. And I'm not going to tell you which ones are cheaper, but you can Google it, to be correct here and not get hate mail. But there's cheap equipment.
Well, let's just say in general, I
Yeah,
know there are 2D
yeah,
mammograms, there's
right,
3D
yeah,
mammogram. Right off the bat, does it
oh yeah,
matter if it's a 2D or a 3D? How much better is a 3D?
so much better. It really is. And that's been proven over and over again now that especially with denser tissue. It sees architectural distortion and things. You just get the better view, and there's more and more advances, with time. The 2D is it's better than nothing. Get it if that's all you have, but ideally it should be a 3D
Mhm.
nowadays.
Are there
Um,
any other things like that we should be looking for or asking for in terms of the technology or the operator
yeah,
or
yeah. Another one that I don't think a lot of people know about this. It's just been pushed into a corner, and I think it's unfortunate. Contrast enhanced mammography. So, and this is where basically they just give you contrast, the same type of contrast that you get in a CT scan or something like that. So, and then you get the mammogram, but the contrast gravitates in the areas with cancer, and it shows up a lot better on the mammogram. It's very, very, very good, and has been shown to be as effective in some studies or almost just as effective in terms of sensitivity with a breast MRI.
wow.
And the advantage is fewer false positives. So the MRI tends to show a lot of things that turn out to be nothing, and this doesn't do that. And not only that, it's quick, it's tolerated well by patients. I'm a big fan of it. I think a lot of people that know the technology in the breast imaging world kind of feel that way as well.
Mhm.
We've seen the benefits. The problem is it's not reimbursed.
Ah,
So everybody's still shuttled to the breast MRI, which of course is, claustrophobic, and you still get the contrast and you're stuck in there and it's just not well tolerated and false positive. So it's a shame it's not utilized more. I had a group here that in the area organization that I've been working with forever and had no idea they even have one. They're like, yeah, we don't use it because we don't get paid.
oh.
So, but that's something that I think patients would really appreciate to know is if it is there and it's offered to you, it's a fantastic tool.
So let me ask you about this. So,
Yeah.
it's not covered. What does that mean?
Mhm.
Like, is that a $20 bill or is that a $400 bill? Like, do we have a sense of how much it would cost to?
Yes. So the contrast, and it's essentially just a mammogram, and so the reimbursement is they'll pay you for the mammogram, and then I think you might get a contrast fee on top, which is $20. But the facilities that are charging this, they want to, if you get an MRI, it's $500. So it's double the reimbursement, and so of course you've got overhead to pay for. So why not shuttle the patient that way?
So it's not necessarily wildly out of pocket different
No,
for the patient.
no,
It's the lost opportunity cost
correct.
for the facility.
Yeah, the patient would want it because you're not going to end up spending as much in terms of copays and deductibles on a $500 to $1,000 study, or it's even more. And you go depend on what hospital system you go to.
Sure.
Outpatient tends to be much cheaper. Obviously, you can pay up to 8 times, 10 times as much in a hospital, and so yeah, that makes a big difference in the pocketbook
Wow.
with and experience and not as much money, out of your pocket and, so and the same outcome.
So do you do contrast enhanced mammography at MammoLink yet?
No, no, I would love to do that, and maybe one day we will. We haven't gotten there yet,
Okay.
and so but, definitely on my radar.
Mhm.
We have to get somebody that can inject on the bus and some other things like that, so but we
Okay.
are looking into it.
Okay, but it is something that someone could ask for in, their local clinic.
Yes.
Ask their OBGYN about it.
Yes, and very good for high risk patients, that would have to get the MRI. I think that's where the real value is, and you're like, well, I hate that, and I think they will if a patient is extremely claustrophobic, can't have the MRI, then they'll try to shuttle them to the contrast enhanced mammography. But why not just start there
Yeah,
for
that's
a lot of
really
patients, right? Because then they skip the MRIs. It was such a pain. It was such a hassle, and it's like, you know,
well, and if it could
you
be
know,
done during mammography, it's that you
yeah,
get past that callback because if
yeah,
you're going to do an MRI, it's always another appointment. So,
exactly,
can you tell me about something that we rarely talk about, which is breast cancer in men? If there are
yeah,
any men listening, either for themselves or for their wives, right?
yeah,
Um, I do want you to know that there are men can get breast
oh
cancer. It
yeah,
is more
oh yeah,
rare.
yep.
It does not happen as frequently, but they can
Mhm,
get it.
mhm.
What do we have to say about men? How worried should they be, and can they get mammograms?
They can, and they do if they have a lump or any symptom. That's usually when the man gets it. The incidence is relatively low in men compared to women, so it's not recommended at this point that men undergo routine screening. But the problem is that men discredit the fact that they could get breast cancer. And so they'll have a lump and they ignore it. And that's where everybody goes wrong. Men have breast tissue just like women. Not everybody know that, but, and so, they get it. And, I've diagnosed several breast cancer in men, and it's usually successful, and men get a mastectomy too. It's just crazy. But, if it's found early, so if you feel that little lump or something and you go to your doctor and they say, okay, and they get the mammogram and the ultrasound and you do the biopsy and it's small, it's a successful treatment. The problem is those that wait, can't get breast cancer and they feel a lump and they ignore it and it just keeps getting bigger. And then they say, what could it be, doc? And it's like, ooh. So it's not officially recommended, but if a man wants a mammogram on our bust, we give it to him.
We had talked a little bit, we touched on genetic testing. And I'll tell you, I shake my head because it seems like the people who get genetic testing are almost always after they have breast cancer.
Yes.
You have breast cancer, and then they're like, we should do genetics.
Yeah.
We should do genetic testing on you. And it's like, so now after the fact, these people are being told, oh, hey, look, you have this mutation of a specific gene, and it's called germline mutation, meaning mutation that you receive from birth, from the DNA that you got from your mother and your father that's been there all along. And these genetic mutations are things that can eventually or become more likely to be cancer.
Right.
And men can carry the BRCA gene.
Yeah.
A lot of women know BRCA gene is a particular mutated gene that has been associated with higher risk of breast cancer.
Yeah.
But I didn't know until recently that men can carry that as well.
Yeah. And that puts them in a different class where they may be indicated for screening. So there are a couple of cases, and one of them includes genetic mutations like that, because it puts them in a whole different category of risk. And so we do see men referred to us for, routine screening because of that high risk from their physicians. And then also too, men that are transitioning, so they're taking exogenous hormones for breast development or something like that. After about 3, 4, 5 years, you're at the same risk as a woman.
That makes a lot of sense. So genetic testing for men too, I want to just kind of come back to say, if your mother had breast cancer or a lot of women in your family, that could be another red flag for men getting genetic testing as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I think you're hitting on, because men just don't think of it at all.
Yeah.
And it's like you're going to have the BRCA mutation, one or two, just like your sister, your mother. So you absolutely should get tested. And I think that's a hugely overlooked part of the screening mentality.
Yeah, because, again, like I hear sometimes, well, we're going to just take a wait and see attitude. We're just going to, guess what? Waiting never bodes well for cancer.
No.
If it is cancer, and I understand there might be reasons to wait and look, if you really think, if you've identified it's a cyst, right? You don't necessarily need to have cysts removed. I don't mean to be alarmist, but if it is cancer, if there is any cancer, then waiting is never, ever, ever a good idea.
No. And we see that come in with DCIS a lot in the conversation right now.
Oh, let's talk about that. Yes, because I was DCIS.
I think we opened that door. Yeah.
DCIS,
Exactly.
and I was, and they kept telling me I was going to be fine. And here I am 13 years later with metastatic breast cancer. So let's talk about DCIS.
Yeah. So it's true. I mean, there's a lot right now, and they're like, oh, well, it's stage 0. It's completely contained. Do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? And so we do see a lot of patients that are, in my opinion, unfortunately, taking that kind of lackadaisical approach, I would say, because you just never know when it's going to blow up. Granted, this isn't a huge study, but, I've seen a lot of patients where, unfortunately, it's like they did the very minimal, and then, next thing you know, it's in the nipple and this and that. And it's like, it's just not something to play with.
Right.
And you hear some misconceptions too. It can just go away. And no, it doesn't go away. Cancer does not go away. So unfortunately.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've even heard some doctors who are even do podcasts say that
Yeah.
DCIS is not cancer and
Yeah.
it's overtreated and
Right.
I personally, yes, I am not a doctor, but my personal experience, they told me it was all DCIS and it was fully contained, and therefore, when I had surgery to get rid of it, it was 100% gone and I was going to be fine. But guess what? When they go through the tissue, sometimes they find areas of microinvasion.
I agree with you. I would say err on the side of caution. There's a value judgment in everything. I mean, some people there are things much worse than dying, and if that's you, that's your right to feel that way.
Sure.
But you have to know what you're dealing with, and it is a huge risk.
Sure. And I do know, I've met so many cancer patients and many metastatic ones.
Hmm.
Uh, and it is different if you are 80 years old,
Hmm.
85 years old, and, you find some DCIS that
Right.
very slow, slow
Right.
growing, slow moving, not an aggressive. You've
Right.
done a
Right.
core needle biopsy and it's not aggressive.
Yeah.
You may feel very differently about, undergoing a big surgery to have it removed or
Right.
something. And that makes tons of sense.
Right.
I
Right.
guess my mind goes more towards where I was, which was I was 39 years old
Yeah.
and even treated with full mastectomy. I ended up with metastatic disease 13 years
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
And that brings up the next thing I was hoping to talk about, which is
Yeah.
postpartum breast cancer.
Yeah.
I really, really want to talk to those young mothers out there,
Yeah.
but even mothers up to 10 years
Yeah.
after having given birth, they can, if you've had breast cancer, if you've been diagnosed within 10 years, but especially within that 5-year window, it is postpartum breast cancer and it acts differently than other breast cancer that is not associated with pregnancy. They know that when milk dries up, there's this massive cell die-off.
Hmm.
And in that cell die-off, sometimes things can go awry and creates this postpartum breast cancer.
Right.
So it tends to be more aggressive, and women with early stage disease,
Hmm.
stage 1, have
Hmm.
a worse prognosis than those who are stage 3 in terms of long-term metastasis and death. So this is something you
Wow.
have to nip in the bud. You
Yeah.
really have to pay attention to. Do you see women who are kind of fairly new to having, have had children and, maybe that makes their breast tissue look different? Tell me what you're seeing with young women and particularly young mothers.
Pregnancy and breast cancer, it's don't mix. It's like fire. And I don't know all of the genetics behind it, but I do know that it's something that we see. And anytime I see pregnancy and a lump, it's like, take it real serious. Is it just going to be a galactocele or, something benign? Yeah, but don't take that chance. And any time, and like you're saying, anytime around the pregnancy, it's a very critical period, apparently biologically. On top of it, that's just an important time in life.
Yeah.
You've got children, you're passing on to future generations and everything else. And so important for the mother to be able to be there and stuff like that. I think that's something that is lacking in our education is the awareness of pregnancy-associated breast cancer and postpartum, as you're talking about. It gets confused because, everybody, this is unfortunate too. It's like, well, I'm pregnant. I don't want to get the mammogram, right? Because then you hear these overblown radiation concerns when it's like, it's not going to harm you or the fetus, right? I understand the concerns, but let's talk about your life potentially. So, you got to weigh the risks and the benefits, and it's critical period, and it's very important to be aware of.
Yeah, to take seriously. And, it's interesting because, you hear you have a mobile mammogram, opportunity. So it seems perfect for young moms
Yeah.
who now might be of age to get a mammogram. I mean, and P.S., if you see a lump, I don't care if you're 18 years old, you just go, right? And you
Mhm.
insist
Yeah.
on going. But the recommendation for getting your first mammogram, I think, is around 40. Is that right?
Yeah. So the recommendation currently is if your average lifetime risk of screening, you start at 40. There's going to be some debate in the near future at some point because of the rising incidence of breast cancer in younger patients. I don't know what's going to happen with it, but at some point we're not going to be able to ignore it. We've actually done our own study, so we allow, because Florida has a statute. Patients are allowed to get a baseline mammogram at 35. Insurance was covered. So, we stick with that. That was the first reason that we started doing this. And so we would allow patients 35 to get a screening mammogram. Plus, at the end of the day, there's no harm, right? But there's a lot of risk. You send that patient away and they have cancer. And we see those popping up in the media, right? They sent me away and stuff. And so we started doing it. And then we've run a study since then. And I can't tell you now because it's been some time, but it was a significant amount. It was over 20,000, 30,000 patients that we'd seen. The same actual incidence of breast cancer in the 35 to 40 as the 40 to 50-year-old age group right now.
Oh,
and in
wow.
our population. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Which I understand is really not. So there's some, who's the guy? There's a guy from Harvard. I forget his name. He's the one that actually kind of invented the tomosynthesis. But he was talking, he said, biologically, there isn't a lot of difference in that age group. So why we chose 40, I don't know, but it's been chosen.
Yes. Sometimes, it's interesting. Sometimes you go back to these things and it does end up seeming like, someone decided that was the cutoff and, there you go. And so I want to circle back to remember to all those listeners out there about the risk assessment. So great to know you can get at 35, you can get a baseline, which highly encourage everyone to do. Remember that this is all about, prevention is key here, and not prevention, but being cognizant of early disease, being able to catch something early. That's the name of the game here. We really need it matters so much to outcome. So trying to go early. So getting that risk assessment to see, because it may even be younger than 35 if you have super high risk, I would imagine.
Yeah, I've just seen a 22-year-old with metastatic breast cancer.
Oh, just breaks my heart. I mean, it really does.
Yeah.
It really does. Is there anything that you can talk to us about with what you're doing at MammoLink that you want patients to know in terms of what they should be expecting from mammography? What have you learned? What are you doing? What do you want to say to women out there in terms of?
Yeah, I think that they should have hope. That they will not have to be dealing with this ridiculous system, hopefully not much longer. I mean, I think we're going to hopefully lead by example. And if, we're successful, I think at that point, people will start to say, okay, maybe we should do more of this. And we've gotten some interest from, hospital groups and other people that maybe have been doing things a little bit more traditionally. And they say, oh, well, he's been successful in this. Maybe we should start paying attention. And so, I think we're in a really, really, really good time for patients. There's so much out there that's going to be available. Things are starting to change more quickly. The healthcare system is broken, and if we can just start finding ways, like we're doing, just the 1%, like we've talked about. There's 1% here, 1% there, 1% there, and just keep whittling away at it. We're going to have a really successful system that people are going to like, they're going to enjoy, and they're going to end up being able to do every year. I'm a firm believer that where this is headed is corporations and companies are going to end up being kind of custodians of care. And because I think that we're going to be able to prove that it's much more effective and also too financially beneficial. And so I think there's going to be systems which are, tied to work and things where patients are going to have ease of getting screened. And so the old system of, calling up your doctor, getting the script, then calling the facility, taking a half day of PTO time off work and going here, I think that's going to go away. And so that's my hope and my life's work.
Well, I definitely would have much preferred having my mammogram pull up in front of my office and run out during lunch hour for
Right. Get a cup of coffee and exactly.
So right now you are only in the state of Florida. Is that correct?
Yeah, for now, correct.
for now, but you have some ambitions, I believe.
God willing, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd love to be able to be everywhere. I'd love to be able to one day look back and say, look, this stadium of people that had breast cancer would not have been found were it not for us. That's kind of like my goal.
That's an awesome goal. And I'll add on to that, to all the people out there, we need to use what we have when we talk about cancer. We could change the statistics of cancer today if we just used what we have at our disposal.
Yes.
And mammogram is one of those tools.
Yeah.
And we already talked about in the beginning how the numbers of compliance saying upwards of 80% in the United States are really misleading.
Yeah.
And in truth, it's far lower. But what we know, and this is from some research that was in the Journal of National Cancer Institute, so NCI, is that in a large study of over 1.5 million women who were aged 50 or older with breast cancer, over half of the late-stage cases, so over half, 52%, had no screening mammogram in the 13 to 36 months before diagnosis. So if you are getting screened annually, the numbers drop significantly in terms of having early-stage breast cancer, which is highly treatable, if not curable, for over 60% of the people. It's usually curable versus getting a late-stage disease, which I have now. So that's why I'm so passionate about telling all the people out there.
Yeah.
It's just, don't be me. You don't want to be me.
Yeah.
So get in and get your mammogram.
So important. And you hit the nail right on the head. That's the elephant in the room. That's the term I like to use for, because it's just right there in front of us. But for some reason, we don't focus on it too much.
Yeah. So personalized care, get your screening done, get your risk assessments done, get your genetic testing done, and visit Ryan if you're in Florida.
Please. Thanks.
Thank you for coming, Ryan. We really
thanks,
appreciate your
Marybeth.
time today.
Yeah, absolutely enjoyed it. Thank you.
And now an important announcement. All the information that was provided today was for educational purposes only. I'm a patient, just like you. I am not a licensed or accredited physician, therapist, or clinical researcher. All information provided is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, therapist, nutritionist, or any other qualified healthcare professional.